Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to create new holdables, and then after that I'll be showing you how to make a consumable holdable, so you can have like maybe a bowl of water or an apple that you can have an animation play and your character will eat it. So to get started we'll make our holdable blueprint, so we'll go to blueprints, then items, and then holdable items. Now there's two ways you can go about creating a new holdable. You can just duplicate one of the existing ones like the building plan or the flashlight, or we can right click the master holdable and create child blueprint class. I'm going to call mine BP video holdable just so we know which one it is, and then we can open that up. So now we're opening that blueprint, you can see that we've got some components that are built into it. When we add our static mesh or skeletal mesh, it's completely up to you. I'm just going to be using a static mesh for this. You need to make sure that it's a child of the attach point. If it's not, then your mesh won't attach to the character's hand correctly. So always make sure that it's attached to the attach point. And you can have multiple mesh components if you want. So if I wanted two separate meshes, you could just add another one, making sure it's a child of the attach point. So I'm going to delete my second one there just so we can work with one, and I'm going to set my static mesh just to the apple for this video. So I've created my apple and I can now compile and save that. Now we need to create a new item in the item list, so we'll go back to the items folder, then to item list, and we will add a new data table row. I'm going to call this holdable _ apple. I'd recommend keeping the naming scheme because it makes it a lot easier to find items when you're selecting them in the drop down menus later on, so it's a bit of advice. I'll just set the name to apple. I'm not going to fill out all of this in detail because there's a separate video on this, so I'll just leave all of this as is. Holdables need to not be stacking, so we'll just allow stacking unticked. Inventory actions, we're going to add a new one, and we're going to add hold/unhold. So this is when we right click on the item in the inventory, we'll get now the hold/unhold option, and then we can set the action name. So this is just the UI name for the button, so I'm just going to put hold. Then world actions, we can leave this as pickup, and we can also add a new one if we want to, and we can also set this to hold. I'll set this to hold. I'll put this all in capitals as well, just so it matches the rest of our system. World actions are when you look at an item when it's in the world, you get the little menu pop up. This just means that the hold option will show up when we look at our apple on the ground. Quick use action, again I'm going to set this to hold. This is just when you drag the drag the item to your quick bar, and you press the number of that quick slot. This is what it will do, so we want this to be hold/unhold. Next we've got the static mesh and skeletal mesh. Our apple is just a static mesh, so I'm just going to be using static mesh, and I'll set this to apple. Now this is the mesh that will be used when our item's actually in the level, like dropped on the ground. If you're using a skeletal mesh, then you would set a skeletal mesh here instead. Then next we've got the world class. I'm going to leave this as static master item because our apple just uses a static mesh, we can just use that. But if you were using the skeletal mesh, you would need to set this to BP _ skeletal master item instead. Going down, we can go to the holdable details, and we can set our holdable slots. So if we click the add button, we can set whether or not our holdable can be put in the primary or secondary weapon slots. We can have multiple options as well, so we can make it so our apple could be equipped in both the secondary and the primary slot if we wanted to. So that's where you would add that there. Because this is an apple, I'm not going to actually have any slots set, because we don't really want to equip an apple to one of our weapon slots. Next is our holdable class. We'll just use the blueprint we just created. So for me, that's video holdable. Then we've got the holdable slot sockets. So this is for when our holdables in our weapons slots, these are the sockets that it will attach to on the character's body. So if we put it in the primary weapon slot, it will attach to the primary socket. If you don't want your weapon to show on the character's body when it's just not equipped, you can just leave these empty. I'm going to do that for my apple because I'm not going to have it attaching to our character when it's in a weapon slot, because we're not using weapon slots anyway, so we don't need those. Next we've got the equip and unequip montages, so you can set a skeletal mesh. So I'm going to pick the mannequin. We want the top one here, and then we can set a equip montage. So I'll just use equip item, and what this allows us to do is control which animation is played for each character mesh type. So for example, you might have a male and female characters. You could set the male skeletal mesh here, and then maybe have a male equipped animation and then a female skeletal mesh and a female equipped animation. But for this video, I'm just going to be using the one animation. Then we can do the same with the unequip. If we search for mannequin again, and I'll search for unequip. Oh, sorry, we just use the equip animation again, equip item, like that. And then lastly, we have only holdable when equipped. I'm going to leave this ticked off because I want to be able to hold my apple when it's just in our inventory. If you tick this to true, then your item would have to be equipped to a weapon slot for the player to be able to hold the weapon. Now, because I plan for this item to be a consumable holdable, I am going to set up the consumable details as well. So I'm just going to tick on can consume. I'll set the hunger to say 80, and then I'll let's see, I'll just leave everything else the same. I have a separate video on consumable items that you can look up if you want, but it's all of these settings are fairly self-explanatory if you want to go through them. So now our items all set up, we can save our item list, and next we're going to create the world item for our apple, so the item that we actually drag into the level. So to do that, we're going to go to items, world items, and we can just duplicate our original apple world item if we want. So I'll just duplicate that, and I'll call it video apple, and I'll do underscore world item just so we know for later on that it is the world item. And we'll double click to open that up, go to item, and then we'll set our row name to the holdable, let's see, holdable apple. Now, if you are using a skeletal mesh for your mesh in the item list, then you need to find a skeletal mesh item to duplicate, or you can just search for skeletal. There we go. So you find this skeletal master item and then just create a child blueprint class of that, open it up, and then you have the same settings as we had in our video apple. You'll just be able to set your item here, and that's for if you're using a skeletal mesh instead of a static mesh. So now that we've done that, we can drag our video apple into the level. So I'll just search for video apple. There we go. We can drag it in, and it's automatically switched to our mesh that we selected. And we would always use this blueprint for dragging the item into the level. You don't want to drag in the video holdable into your level at all. The system uses this blueprint for when the character's holding the item. You don't ever need to put that into the level. So now our item's all set up, we can go back to our holdable blueprint, and there's a few things we're going to need to set. So if we go to class defaults, you can see we've got a few options. So the first one is held socket. Now this is the socket that the apple will be attached to when we equip it from our character. So by default this is just the right hand socket, but if you want to, you can go to the character's skeleton. So for me that's in meshes, skeleton, and then let's see, mannequin skeleton. And you can find all of our existing sockets here, and if you wanted to create a new one, you'd select, say, the right hand, right click and do add socket, and then you could move the socket around however you like. So going back to our Holdable Blueprint again, we can set animations for our character to use while they're holding this item. Because this is an apple, I'm just going to actually tick this off, so it will just use our character's default empty hands animations. But if you had custom animations you wanted to use, this is where you'd set them, and you would make sure this value is set to true, and then you could set your third person animations and your first person arms animations here. The rest of these are typically used for weapons, and they're covered in the adding ranged and adding melee weapons videos. You can check those out if you want to find out more about these. Moving down through the settings, we've got sway, leaning and clipping. Again, these are more focused towards weapons. Again, you can check out the adding ranged weapon video to see how to set those up. Durability won't be used for our apple here. If we scroll down a little bit further, we can find movement speeds, and if we enable use holdable movement speeds, then our character will use these movement speeds we set in here while holding our apple for these different states. Stances, again, is covered in the ranged weapon video, and then we have the camera shake settings, so you can tell the system to use these camera shake objects when we're holding our apple, or if you don't want to, you can just untick and it will use the default empty hand ones instead. So now we're ready to test our apple. We can just compile this and we'll hit play. And now I'm going to pick up my apple. You can see it's added to the thing. It doesn't have an image because I didn't set one in the item list, but if we right click we can select hold, and we've equipped our apple. Now I've forgotten to do something. If I move, I start flying around all over the map. That's fine. You just need to go to your Holdable Blueprint, select the static mesh, then we'll find collision settings, collision presets. We'll change this to no collision. We'll change can character step on to no, and we'll turn off generate overlap events, so it should look like this. Now we can just compile, and we should be able to jump in and pick up our apple again, and we can move around and it's not making our character movement break. So our apple doesn't really look like it's in a great position, and that's because we're just attaching it to our right hand socket. If you want to adjust the socket during gameplay so you can see how it's going to affect where the apple goes, we can just go to our character skeleton. So I'll search for mannequin, and we'll open up our skeleton. Now I'll make this a bit smaller so you guys can see, and if I hit F8 while I'm in the viewport, you see I can jump out and I can see where our apple is. So with our, let's see, find our hand, our socket, we can move it in our skeleton. You can actually see it updates in game. Now I'd recommend, if you plan on moving the socket, to create your own socket, because other things use the hand our socket in the system, and this will affect those as well. So if you do need to move your sockets, then I'd recommend creating your own, setting it in your Holdable Blueprint, and then you'll be able to move it around, and it will only affect the item that you want. But for this, I'm just going to edit the right hand socket, and I'll move it so it's sort of roughly more in line with our character's hand, sort of like that, so it sort of looks like he's holding it. So now that position is saved for our character, we can jump in and you can see it's updated in game, and it looks a little bit better now. And you can also make adjustments in the Holdable Blueprint if you like. So I'll move this as well. Zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. You can see if I start moving our apple, it will actually move in game as well. And I'll turn off snapping. I could rotate it as well if I want. And apply adjustments this way as well. So now we've got the basics of our Holdable set up, where our character's holding our item, we can see it, and we've adjusted it to sort of fit the location that we want. Next, we probably want to add some kind of code to our Holdable so it can actually do stuff. So we'll exit out of our game and go to our, we want to go to our Apple video, I can't remember what I called it, so I'll just go to the blueprints, items, holdable items, and it's the video holdable. And I'll just bring that over here. So in our event graph, there's a few nodes that we can use to sort of start adding code to our holdable. First one, if we search for event primary, you can find event survival game kit client primary action, and you can also find client. If we search for event primary, you can find server primary action. Now these will be run when the player clicks left mouse button while holding our apple. Obviously this one will run on the client side, this one will run on the server side, and you also get an output basically saying if the key's pressed down or if it's been released. There's also secondary. So if we search for secondary, you can see we've got the client secondary action and the server secondary action. This is our right mouse button. So again, this will be run on the client when the right mouse button is pressed down, and this will be run on the server when the right mouse button is pressed down. Now you may want to add additional events. So say for example you wanted, if your player pressed H on their keyboard, you wanted an event for that in your holdable. I can quickly show you guys how to do that. We'll go to the blueprints folder and search for holdable interface. And in here, we'll add a new function. We'll call this SGK H input, for example. And we could add the input. I'm going to want this to be key down, just like our primary actions. So we've got key down, then we'd compile. And we'll go back to our holdable and we'll do event H input, I think I called it. Let's see. There we go, event survival game kit H input. So we've got our event, but this still won't be called because we're not calling it anywhere. So what we'll do is if we go to the player inventory component, and we'll go to event graph and then interaction. In here you can see that we've got client primary action and client secondary action. So what we'll do is we'll just do the same thing, custom event client H action we'll call it, and then we'll copy our is holding item. Then we'll copy these two nodes as well just to get our holdable item, and then we'll call the SGK H input, and we'll call it as a message like that, and then we'll just take key down and we'll drag it and connect it to our event just anywhere, and it will actually just create the input for us. Then we can compile, and now we'll open up our master character, and in here if we find you can see that our fire input, so this is our left mouse button, actually calls the client primary action event that we just saw in the player inventory component here. So we're going to do a similar thing. So what we'll do is we'll just, I'm just going to use an input event to give you guys an example, and I'll search input event H. We'll try and find it in the list. There we go, H. Then from that we'll just copy one of these player inventory nodes, paste that in. So we'll check if our player inventory is valid, then we'll call our client H action, and then we'll make a copy and paste of that we want to do when our key is released. And we want key down ticked on this one because this is when the key is pressed, and then key down is ticked off. So this is now our client H event. I didn't actually call it client, so in here I'll go back and I'll just say client, and then I'll duplicate this. We can't duplicate in here. We'll just create another one. We'll go survival game kit server. So we have a server and client version like we do of our primary action events. So we've got our server version. We'll add a new key down input like that. We'll compile. Now if we go back to our master character, you can see that we've got these events, and they basically just do exactly the same thing as our client one, but they're called on the server. So we'll double click one of these. You can see it looks exactly the same, just with server events. So I'll do a custom event. We'll call this server H action. We'll set it to run on server, reliable, and we'll add a new input. We'll call this key down. Then we'll just copy these nodes, paste them up here. We'll drag out, and then we're going to call survival game kit server H. And you can see it's already there. Say H input, but we want the message version. We can connect this up, plug in our key down here, and now we just pop back to the master character, and we need to add the server versions over here. So we'll search for server H action, tick key down, and then do the same down here. Make sure we connect up the targets, and then we untick key down for that. Compile, and now when we press H while holding our apple, so if we do survival game kit server H input, you can see we've got now our server version and our client version, just like our secondary and primary actions. And if we use the server one, I'll just drag out and do a print string hello. So now when we press H, we would expect our print string to run. So I'll hold our apple, I'll press H, and you can see it's actually running twice, and that's because remember that it will be run once when our key is pressed down, and then once when it's pressed when it's released. And then if you just wanted it to be when the key is pressed down, you just add a branch here like that. So now our code will only be run when I press down H while holding our apple. So that's pretty much it for if you want to add a new Holdable and be able to run code in that Holdable's blueprint. But next I'm going to show you quickly how to set it up. So we'll basically play an animation. Once our animation finishes, our characters will eat our apple, and it will make our hunger go up and everything. So to get started, we're going to go to our Holdable blueprint here, and I'm going to get rid of these client events as well, and the secondary. I'm just going to use the primary. So when I hold left mouse, I want the animation to play. If I let go of left mouse before the animation finishes, it will cancel it. So we'll start off, I'll just make a branch here so we know if our key is being pressed down or not. If it is, we want to play an animation, so I'm going to use custom event. I'm going to call this multicast play anim. And we won't use that, we'll use get character component. From that we can use multicast play montage. And we need a montage to play. So I'm going to use an animation I got from Smart AI, which is just a hands up animation. I don't have like an eating animation, but if you guys do, you can plug those in here. So I'm going to set my montage here. I think it's called hands. There we go, hands up. And I'll just use the same one for our first person as well. Again, you can set specific ones for first person and third person if you want to. So I'm going to have if key down, we play this animation. Then we're going to copy and paste our character component again, and we'll do multicast stop montage. And we want this to happen if we let go of our primary action, so that's our left mouse. Again, we'll set the montage to our hands up so it knows which one it wants if we want it to stop. And you can change the blend out time. This is just how smooth the animation will be when it stops. I'm going to leave mine as 0 for now. Now next, our video Holdable needs to know when our animation is done, or when we want it to eat our item. So what we'll do is we'll copy our character component, and we'll do bind animation notify, like that. And basically what this does is there's an event that exists already in our character component that basically runs whenever a notify is run from our animation blueprint. and this event will tell us which one's been run. So I'm just going to name this anim notify, and we want to check, is this the notify that we care about? So I'm going to name mine eat. I'll do it eat like that, and if it is that, then we want to eat our item, so I'll connect that up here. So now whenever an anim notify called eat is run, we can have our item consumed. So we need to create this new anim notify. So to do that, I'm going to go to my hands up animation. Hands up. Oh, I've got it in the wrong folder. There we go. So I'm going to go to my montage. I'm going to right click on the notifies line here, and I'm going to do add notify, new notify, and I'm going to call this eat, just like that. And I'll move it to near the end. So once our animation gets to sort of this point, which is about 2.7 seconds in, he will eat our item, and our hunger will go up. Now, when using montages, make sure that you set your slot correctly. So if you set it to default slot, any animation you play will affect the entire character's body. So for example, if you were walking along and you started playing our hands up animation, then the legs would actually just stop moving and you'd sort of hover around. We don't want that to happen. So I'm going to use upper body post AO group. So this animation will play only on the top half of the body. Next, just make sure you save your montage before testing. Now we're going to go to the third person anim blueprint. So we'll just search for third person. Oh, I spelled third wrong. Third person. There we go. We'll open that up. And then in the event graph, we're just going to search for eat, which was the name of our notify. And if we scroll up to the top here, you can see we've got event anim notify underscore eat. Then we're going to do get character component. We'll drag out and we'll do call animation notify, like that. And we're just going to enter the name of our eat notify. So this is eat, like that. And we can compile. Next, we're going to go back to our Holdable Blueprint. And we're going to add in our code that's going to eat our apple for us. So we'll start off with a switch has authority, because we only want the server to run this code when our eat notify is called. Then we're going to get the character component. From that, we're going to, sorry, we don't want the character component, we want the player inventory component. From that, we're going to do get holding invent slot. And then we're going to also copy and paste and do server use item action. Connect this up to authority, like that. Then we're going to drag out from our holding invent slot and do a break. And we want the, we'll drag out from our invent slot ID, do make. And we'll take the invent component, plug that into inventory, and then route into index, like that. And then action we'll set to consume, because that's what we want to do to our apple when we play our animation. So now that's done, we're pretty much finished. One thing I did forget to say is in your item list with our apple item selected, make sure in consumable details you've at least set the use amount to 1. If this is 0, then the character won't eat your apple. But now we're ready, we can hit play, and we can pick up one of our apples here. And if I hold left mouse, we start to do our hands up, and if I let go, you see he cancels it, and we don't eat our apple. But if I hold down and wait a few seconds, you can see he's eating his apple at the point that we had our notify in the animation, and then once he's finished, he's stopped. You can see our apple's gone. And also, if your Holdable has multiple or has a stack, you can see we can hold it. If I use it again, you can see my hunger just went up, the animation finished, and now I only have 2 of the item when I had 3 before. So if I do it again, you see the hunger goes up and I only have 1 of the apple now. Now another modification you could do is instead of having it all sort of run off an animation notify, we could literally just play, we could just run our consume code instead. If you didn't want to play any animations, you just wanted it to be used instantly, we would just connect it up like this. And now when we left mouse click, we'll use our item instantly, which we can quickly check now. Hold our item, hold down, and you can see it's instantly used our item. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Hopefully you found it useful and you know how to make your own holdable blueprints.